continue in his theme this week on Abraham, the father of the faithful. His class number 2 is entitled Abraham and Lot. Brother Neville.
Well, brothers and sisters, young people, we continue this afternoon our study of the story of the life of Abraham. And now sorry, I won't start just yet for a moment. The introduction we understood in chapter 12, where we really laid the foundation of Abraham's life, the first faithful attempt that he had of making decisions in his own life without consultation with God, the trouble that caused, that brought upon not just him but also upon his family. In fact, creating problems that would now plague Abraham for the rest of his life. All those things happen in chapter 12 as a result of supplementing the judgment of God with his own judgment. And as we see, there's an enormous exhortation there, because it's in these sorts of times that God tests us, and we have to start thinking very hard about what the real answers are we should be making in the truth to the problems of life. And that's the time that our prayers should be strongest. When in fact, when the world presents us options, it's often the time when our prayer is weakest. As we made the point, Abraham was wont to make altars for sacrifice as he made his southward journey down through the land. But there are no altars. From the time that he makes his decision to go to Egypt, there's no more altars. Nothing like that happens again. He's not involving God in the major decisions of life until he gets right back to the altar that he last made between Bethel and Ai, when we come down to chapter 13 and verse 4, as we've just read it together. Well, as Abraham left Egypt that day, I suppose he might have thought, as you and I might think, that he'd put all those events behind him. He was now determined to take life in a different course and to make different decisions, and simply close down that whole epoch as a bad memory that might never ever be repeated. Well, it wasn't sadly to be true, because in every sense, chapter 13 is an absolute sequel to the events that you have recorded in chapter 12. We might think, for example, in chapter 12 that Abraham created a problem for his wife. And it's true, he did create a problem for his wife. But what about the problem he created for Lot? That's the subject really of chapter 13 now. And there's enormous lessons here, enormous lessons. Verse 1, Genesis 13. Abraham went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south. And here's the issue right away. And the Bible's eloquent, because it says that Abraham leaves Egypt and he takes 3 things. Number 1, he takes his wife. Number 2, he takes everything he had. Number 3, he takes Lot, in that order. In chapter 12, we saw the problem that he created in relation to his wife. In chapter 13, we're going to see the problem he's created in relation to Lot. And those 2 problems are related by everything he had. Everything he had. You see, so those 3 things that he took out of Egypt in chapter 13, verse 1, look back to the problems of chapter 12, look forward to the problems of chapter 13, and relate them by all the substance that he's now accumulated. He sold his wife into Pharaoh's house in chapter 12. That's where the money came from. He receives a substantial remuneration. You read about it in chapter 12, verse 16. As a consequence, in chapter 13, verse 2, it tells you Abraham's very rich in cattle, silver, and gold. He now leaves Egypt an extremely wealthy man. And what's the result of that? Chapter 13, verse 6, their substance at the end of the verse is so great that they could not dwell together. So you see that in selling his wife, it's given him everything he had, and it's going to cost him his nephew. That's the consequence in chapter 13 of the sin that began in chapter 12. So the point is, even though Abraham might have put it behind him, even though he might not repeat that folly, even though God might forgive him for everything he did in chapter 12, the consequences are going to walk with him out of the land of Egypt and affect his family in a very intimate way. So he might have walked out of Egypt a richer man, but spiritually he was poorer, and he's now created big problems for his family, which he just can't erase. Verse 3. And he went on his journeys from the south, even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai. As we found in our last class, he retraces his steps right back to where he was at the beginning, to where he last had a very developed and serious relationship with God, before the whole Egyptian crisis began in verse, say, 10 of chapter 12. He goes right back to where he was, almost as if he comes to a fork in the road between Bethel and Ai, and he takes the right-hand path to Egypt, and he realises that's a mistake, so he goes back to the fork in the road, and now he takes the left-hand path, walking with God. It really reads almost like that. But if we're ever to do that in life, which Abraham has done, it requires one critical criteria, and that is personal honesty. You've got to be honest. You've got to be honest about where the problems began. You've got to be honest about what the problems are and who's caused them. And most often we've caused them ourselves. And you've got to take that to your God in prayer, as I believe Abraham does in these early verses of chapter 13, and rise up again and begin again with a clean piece of paper. The consequences, however, of the things we do remain with us. He goes back to the place where he was at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai. That's interesting. What does Bethel mean? It means the house of God. What does Ai mean? It means ruin. So there's the fork in the road, isn't it? One way leads to the house of God, and the other way leads to ruin. And Abraham's had a taste of what ruin looks like, and he will never go there again. The problem is he's got standing right beside him, at the beginning of this chapter, his nephew. And these two people are going to make two very different decisions in ecclesial life, and for one of them it's going to lead to the house of God, and for the other one it's going to lead to ruin. This is the story of Genesis chapter 13. Two men, two very different ecclesial models, two very different approaches to the truth, two very different approaches to separation from the things of the world, two very different consequences for their families and for their ecclesias. One leads to the house of God, and the other one leads to ruin. A highly significant phrase, therefore, in verse 3 of Genesis 13 as the chapter begins. And it says in verse 4, unto the place of the altar which Abraham made there at the first, that he goes there and calls on the name of Yahweh. So here's Abraham's great confession. And I dare say all the things of chapter 12 the mistakes that he made, he confesses here and rebuilds his relationship with God. An awful mistake. It greatly affected his family. He was desperately sorry for this. Never ever goes back to Egypt, as we said. Never would even let Isaac leave the nation, let alone go to Egypt. Wouldn't even let him go north to Haran. Beware that thou bring not my son thither again, he says to Eliezer, as Eliezer goes to find a wife for Isaac. But for all Abraham's repentance, the consequences couldn't be undone. And he had a young man standing beside him who up until this time had looked to him. I mean, think about that. Lot doesn't have a father. He's got two uncles. He's going to adopt himself to one of these two uncles. And he makes the choice in favour of Abraham because we can only assume he sees Abraham as a better leader, as a man more like what he'd like to be. Presumably saw in Nahor all the laziness and the lack of initiative that Nahor's name conveys. So he attaches himself to Abraham. And Abraham, of course, being, we would imagine, a generation older than Lot, is going to make the decisions for the family, and Lot's going to be, you expect, pretty happy with the sort of direction that Abraham's taking. Bear in mind that it was Abraham God called, so Lot knows that Abraham's a man of faith. Up until this time, however, Abraham has probably involved Lot in these decisions. I mean, Lot was an adult. As you'll know, if you've got adult children, the time comes when you can no longer just dictate to your children everything that you might want to do in life. You've got to bring them along with you. You've got to treat them as adults. And even though your family might not quite run as a democracy, the fact is, it doesn't run as a democracy. The fact is, you're going to be cognizant of the fact that you've got adult members in your household and treat them as such. Well, Abraham is the decision maker, but he can't ignore the fact that Lot is an independent adult at the same time. And what you find, therefore, as you start to look through all the decisions that Abraham has made, he involves Lot in all these decisions. In chapter 11 and verse 31, when they left Ur, it says that Terah took Abraham and Lot. Now, that wasn't Abraham's decision necessarily. Terah takes the initiative, but Abraham was, you've got to believe, going to go anyway because God's told him to. But Terah takes Abraham and Lot. So there was a conversation between adults of these three when they left Ur of the Chaldees. Chapter 12, verse 4. Abraham departs from Haran. Lot went with him. So Lot makes his adult decision. Chapter 13, verse 1. Abraham went up out of Egypt, he, his wife, all he had, and Lot with him into the south. The only major decision that Abraham makes, which doesn't appear to involve Lot, is the decision of chapter 12, verse 10. There was a famine in the land. Abraham went down to Egypt to sojourn there because the famine was grievous. Why doesn't it say Abraham and Lot went down to Egypt? Everywhere else it says that Abraham moves, it's Abraham and Lot, or it's Terah, Abraham and Lot, or it's Abraham and Sarah and Lot. What's going on in chapter 12, verse 10? But it's clear that Lot did go down to Egypt with Abraham because he comes up out of Egypt with Abraham in chapter 13, verse 1. I don't believe Abraham consulted Lot. He makes a unilateral decision. But he's pressed, isn't he? He's got a lot of people depending upon him. He's got to make a decision in favour of the ecclesia. For the benefit of the ecclesia, he's got to put food on the table. There's a bit of a problem. The camp's becoming a bit fractious. He's got to do something. He's got to do it quickly. We're going to Egypt. You coming, Lot? And off they go. And then when they get to Egypt, Abraham tells fibs, and there's red faces all round. And then they get to the border of Egypt, and Pharaoh thrusts them out of the land, or Pharaoh's men thrust them out of the land, and they go back into chapter 13, verse 1, back into the land of Canaan with their tails between their legs. And Lot's tarnished by this reputation now through no fault of his own. It wasn't his lie. And this uncle, which he's trusted up until now, has severely let him down. This was a really bad decision. And you know what happens in ecclesial life. It may be that there's a brother, or a family, or a group of arranging brethren in ecclesial life that make faithful decisions on behalf of your ecclesia for many years. And perhaps some of those decisions don't always go your way. And you might say, well, I can see why they've made them, but I don't think they took everything into account. But you comply anyway because it's, best for the truth, and life moves on and things are forgotten. And then one of those brethren fails, and perhaps does something which gains them a certain level of notoriety. It might be a major failure. Now this wasn't a disfellowship issue for Abraham, but it was conspicuous in the context of his ecclesia. He makes a bad decision for his ecclesia. Now he can rebuild it at some level, but the scars are still there. Well, in ecclesial life when that happens, all of a sudden, very often, what also occurs is people say, wow, he's not as good as we thought he was. I could always see this coming. Sooner or later, the pride was going to get to him. Sooner or later, this was going to happen. And all of a sudden, you might forget the good that they've done, or the fact that this was not in character, but that you've actually got a bit of a niggle, and business grows like this. And now you can see no good in this brother at all, no matter what he does. And even if he comes to your door and kneels on your doormat and begs your forgiveness, you won't hear it. Because he's not fit to be an ecclesial leader anymore. He's going to act like that. Now these things do occur. And it's the sad fact of life, and ecclesial life, that they can often occur. And people can all of a sudden make justifications for now doing things in life which they wouldn't have done before because, well, now this brother's not as perfect as what you may perhaps once have thought. So not only do we not follow his leadership, we don't listen to anything he says ever again. Now that might sound like an extreme reaction. It is an extreme reaction, but it's not an unheard of reaction. That is exactly what Lot does. So now the strife between the herdmen, between Abraham's camp and Lot. Look, verse 5. Lot also, chapter 13, verse 5. Lot also, which went with Abraham, had flocks and herds and tents. Now where have they come from? Wow, I've accumulated quite a lot of wealth in Egypt. Lot is now independently wealthy. He no longer needs to stay in Abraham's camp. He's got enough money to do what he wants by himself. Egypt has changed everything, you see. And so he now no longer needs to rely on Abraham for anything. He's independent. And the land now, verse 6, is not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. Why couldn't they dwell together? Look at verse 7. The Canaanite and the Perizzite could dwell together, so the world can get along, but two brethren can't get along. Why? Because they've got too much money. Could you believe it? Generally speaking, if I was to offer you a promotion on your job, you'd regard it as a blessing. You might even be thankful to God for it. Look what it's done here. Now, yes, the money has come their way in somewhat ignominious circumstances, but the money's the money. Lot's going to step to his uncle in adversity, and he's going to depart from him in prosperity. And the money's done it. The money and Abraham's misfortunate conduct in chapter 12. Terrible thing. And even the world in that situation seems to have no problem getting along side by side with itself. But two brethren just can't do it. So what's the problem? You come into 1 Timothy chapter 3. This is an interesting chapter because this is the chapter which we often read in the context of ecclesial elections. And in ecclesial elections, what we're trying to do is elect members, brethren, for leadership positions in the ecclesia. Now, it might be as far as arranging brethren are concerned, or it might even be for ministry positions in the ecclesia. Where they are, there are certain qualifications that you've got to have if you're going to be in an administrative or leadership capacity in the ecclesia. And those qualifications are contained in Timothy and in Titus. Let's just imagine now what you'd be if because of Abraham's conduct you have been severely embarrassed in front of the world, so that now they all know you're a Christadelphian and you now know what they think of you, and it's not your fault, but this other brother who you've looked up to, who's a generation older than you, and has been your faithful leader up until this time, has let you down. How would you think about the next ecclesial election? This is a true saying. 1 Timothy 3 verse 1. If a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. A bishop, or an overseer as the word means. This is particularly speaking about arranging brethren as overseers rather than as deacons or ministers. A bishop must then be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behaviour, given to hospitality, apt to teach. Okay, now, you can imagine what's going through lots of mind. How would he regard Abraham in relation to these qualifications? A bishop must be blameless. The husband of one wife. Well, it'd be good if she admitted that she is his wife, wouldn't it? Blameless? Blameless means beyond reproach, a man of impeccable character. Now, what part of Genesis 12 would you say that really refers to in terms of Abraham's life? Not the Egypt part, that's for sure. Of good behaviour. The word means respectable or modest. Well, like telling them she's your sister, would that be good behaviour? No, it wouldn't be good behaviour. Verse 3. Not given to wine, no striker, not greedy of filthy lucre. Abraham didn't feel the need to resist the financial rewards of Pharaoh. He didn't see the need to return the money. Now, I'm not saying Abraham should return the money, but you can imagine a brother who is aggrieved at another brother, now looking for reasons to knock him off on all these qualifications. You can see how it can happen in ecclesial life, can't you? Verse 4. One that ruleth his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. Ruleth his well house. Ruleth well his house. And Lot might well add, for if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the ecclesia of God? That's what it says in verse 5. Well, what sort of a household ruler was Abraham? And therefore, just what sort of ecclesia should we allow Abraham to control? Should we want to be part of Abraham's ecclesia from now on if this is how he's going to conduct himself? Verse 7, moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without. Well, what part of Egypt do you think that would relate to? They were escorted to the border in no uncertainty. He was thrown out of Egypt by them that are without. So you can see a brother could become extremely aggrieved in such circumstances, particularly if he was tarred with the same brush. And now Lot's got a situation where he might not listen to another word that Abraham ever says. And you say that's irrational. Abraham's certainly an intelligent man. He's seen more of life than Lot has. And he, despite what he might have done, he's still a faithful servant of God. Oh, yes, yes, yes. But look what the Bible tells you. Think about ecclesial life and the relationships we have with each other. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity, Psalm 133. So the relationship we have with each other is one of the strongest relationships in the world. One of the strongest. It's like a marriage. It's stronger than flesh and blood. Because despite what might be flowing through our veins, our values are the same. I know what you believe, you know what I believe about the most important things in life. Well, that creates an immediate relationship that doesn't happen between siblings, for example, naturally. But because of the strength of that relationship and the trust that that relationship implies, Proverbs 17 verse 17 says, Proverbs 18 verse 19 says, a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle. So we have a relationship based on what we believe, and we trust each other, and we cut each other a fair amount of slack because of our common belief. But the minute you step over the line, you've got to understand that you've touched something very precious, and it damages very easily. And you can't just walk back into fellowship or back into a relationship as if nothing's ever gone wrong. It's going to require a fair bit of work. Because a brother offended is harder to be won. It's easier to conquer a city than to retake the confidence of your brother. That is the nature of our relationship, isn't it? It's a very strong relationship, but because of that, there's something very sacred about it. So you can't fool around with that. Well, brotherly love has got to be two ways, and if the rift between Abraham and Lot's going to be healed, it's going to require agreement by both parties. And if one of those parties doesn't agree, the rift will never be healed. And it appears in this case is that Abraham is highly likely to want to heal the breach. He was the one that transgressed. He was the one that Lot looked up to. He's already made his peace with God by the time you get to the early verses of chapter 13. And therefore it appears there is a willingness in the mind of Abraham, but there is no willingness in the mind of Lot. No matter what Abraham does for Lot now, there is nothing he can do to regain this brother's confidence. Nothing at all. So, come back to chapter 13 of Genesis. In chapter 13, we've got a rift between the herdsman of Abraham and the herdman of Lot. Do you really reckon the problems between the herdmen? Don't you think, since those herdmen worked for Abraham and those herdmen worked for Lot, that if Abraham and Lot had been united and they had given pretty clear instructions to their herdmen, don't you think those herdmen could have got along together? Of course they could have. It's like my children fighting with your children. If the parents are united and we say cut it out, the children will find a way to get along. But if the parents are divided, the children will reflect that. Well, that's exactly what's happening here. The herdman is simply manifesting the strife that there now is between Abraham and Lot. Chapter 14, what's going to happen is the northern kings are going to come and conquer Sodom. Lot is going to be taken captive. Abraham's going to hear of that. He's going to feel duty-bound to go and save Lot, which he does with his trained and armed men. Goes up north, defeats the kings in the slaughter of the kings, as Hebrews records it, brings Lot back and all the stuff, and they walk back down from way up north of Damascus all the way back down to the area of Jerusalem where Sodom was. Well, what do you reckon the discussion would have been on the way home? Don't you reckon the discussion would have been about how things were in Egypt and now the relationship between us and we ought to be able to get along? What was Lot's reaction to that? Would Lot go back and join Abraham's ecclesia? Or set up his sister ecclesia on the other hill? Not in your life. He wants to be across there. He wants to be miles away from Abraham and Abraham's ecclesia. Well, of course, chapter 19 turns up and God's now going to destroy Sodom. And Lot's got to leave Sodom. So if you were Lot, where would you go? You've got to leave Sodom because Sodom's going to be destroyed. And the angel grabs him by the hand and says, let's go into the mountains. Now it happens to be that Hebron, where Abraham was up in the mountains. Lot says, what are those mountains? Let's go to Zoar. Well, the first issue was to get Abraham out of the vicinity of Sodom and Gomorrah so that it could be destroyed. So the angel lets him go to Zoar. Why doesn't he go to Hebron? Because he won't join Abraham's ecclesia no matter what Abraham does. And even if Abraham saves his life, and even if it's clear that his entree into Sodom was an unmitigated failure, he will never, ever join Abraham's ecclesia again, no matter what. That's what's happened in Genesis chapter 12. There is nothing Abraham can do but pray for him. Well, as I said a moment ago, Genesis 13 is not just the issue of Lot losing constant confidence in Abraham. Chapter 3 is the story of two families, of two family policies, of two family lifestyles and approaches to living the truth. One approach, that is Abraham's approach, fled every contamination with the world. Abraham wouldn't have anything to do with the world, no matter what it offered. He'd been pretty burned down Egypt. Lot says, well, that's a bit extreme. The world can offer us some benefits, and you want to be able to see the benefits and the things that the world has to offer. Abraham's approach, therefore, would distance itself from the world, even at a personal cost. And let's not pretend it was easy to live up there on the hills compared with living down on the plain. Abraham chooses the place where life is harder. Lot says it's ridiculous. You're just making work for yourself. We want to go down there and live on the plain. We've got more spare time. Maybe we can do more Bible study in our spare time because food's so much easier to produce. But whatever the justification might have been, you can see we've got clearly two very different policies as far as living the truth is concerned. But understand this, we're not talking about Abraham the righteous and Lot the apostate. Lot was also a righteous man. 2 Peter 2 verse 7 says Lot was a just and righteous man. Galatians 15 verse 6 says that Abraham was a righteous. Genesis 15 verse 6 says Abraham also was a righteous man. We've got two faithful brethren. They just happen to have two different ecclesial models, two very different policies. One policy is going to lead to the house of God, but the other policy is going to lead to ruin. Yet these two themselves are personally faithful. Well, I've got no doubt that Abraham's aware of all of this. And he felt the wedge go between them. He knew what the implications were of the herdmen. And so it finally comes to a head in verse 8 of chapter 13. And Abram says to Lot, listen, Lot, he says, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, between my herdmen and thy herdmen. We be brethren. Brethren ought, Psalm 133 verse 1, to dwell together in unity. So let's have no wedge, let's have no conflict or strife between the pair of us, he says. Don't let's fall out about this lot. Even the world can get along peacefully. We want to at least be able to do the same thing. But we don't have to live in each other's pockets. So let's just, you know what? Lot, verse 9, is not the whole land before thee. Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If you take the left hand, I'll go to the right. Or you go to the right and I'll go to the left. So you choose where you want to go and I'll live on the opposite side. We'll still be able to see each other, but, we're not in each other's pockets. Now, this is how things actually looked. You've got to sort of put yourself in the position of Abraham and Lot. So here's where they live, here, between Bethel and Ai. This is where the discussion's happening, because that's where they've got to in chapter 13 and verse 4. And it says that Lot lifts up his eyes and beholds the cities of the plain. So here they are here. This is where Lot's going to end up living. What that tells you is that they were standing there facing east. Because all Lot did was lift up his eyes and he sees the city of the plain. So what do you think it means, therefore, when it says in verse 9 that Lot says, you take the left and Abraham says, you take the left and I'll take the right, or vice versa. Well, they're standing there looking this way. Abraham says, you go that way and I'll go this way. Or you go this way and I'll go that way. Abraham's saying, let's go north and south. At no point does Abraham even contemplate. You've got to sort of put yourself in the position of Abraham and Lot. So here's where they live, here, between Bethel and Ai. This is where the discussion's happening, because that's where they've got to in chapter 13 and verse 4. And it says that Lot lifts up his eyes and beholds the cities of the plain. So here they are here. This is where Lot's going to end up living. What that tells you is that they were standing there facing east. Because all Lot did was lift up his eyes and he sees the city of the plain. So what do you think it means, therefore, when it says in verse 9 that Lot says, you take the left and Abraham says, you take the left and I'll take the right, or vice versa? Well, they're standing there looking this way. Abraham says, you go that way and I'll go this way. Or you go this way and I'll go that way. Abraham's saying, let's go north and south. At no point does Abraham even contemplate crossing that river. Well, Lot looks, I suppose, north and south, and then just lifts up his eyes and looks across the river and he goes, wow. And what does he see? Well, he sees a well-watered plain. Well, it tells you in verse 10. He lifts up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well-watered everywhere before Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Egypt, as that cometh unto Zoar. So Lot looks down at the plain of Jordan and he sees it's very much like the land of Egypt where they came from in chapter 12. And it's very much like the Garden of Eden where they left in chapter 11. And there's never going to be a famine down there because there's a river right beside you. So why would I ever go and live on the top of a hill, Abraham, where a famine could be a risk every year? You see what Abraham's taught Lot to do in chapter 12? He's taught him to take the things that the world offers and to perhaps trust the security that the world supplies. That's what he's taught Lot. He's put a stumbling block in this young brother's path, and now this young... Lot's not the sharpest mind in the Bible anyway. His name means veil. He can't see where things lead to. He doesn't understand implications, and he makes a decision for the moment, thinking that this will be all right. Because he was a righteous man. He would never get involved with the things of Sodom, and so therefore he just presumes that the people he's got with him will have the same approach to that as he does. Woefully naive. But that's the decision Lot makes, you see. He's not really a very good ecclesial leader. But despite everything that happens, he will never trust Abraham again. Sad but true. Very sad, but very true. And look at the steps to Lot's decline. Now, this is Sunday school stuff you read, but you can read them. There's strife between them, so there's ecclesial trouble now in Abraham's ecclesia. Lot beheld the cities of the plain and the well-watered plain, so he looks for solutions outside of ecclesial life. And he chose one. Any alternative is better than staying with Abraham. You can see that because no matter what Abraham does for Lot now, he will never go and join Abraham's ecclesia ever again. And he journeys geographically downwards and spiritually downwards. No question. He's descending vertically down to go to the valley, and it was a spiritual descent as well. He separates from Lot. You know, Galatians 3 verse 9 is interesting. Because in Galatians 3 verse 9 simply says that they which be of faith are blessed with faithful Abraham. And here's the brother who's making the decision not to ever be again with faithful Abraham. And so he dwells in Sodom. It tells you in verse 12 of Genesis chapter 13, Abraham dwelled in the land of Canaan. Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain. There are, as you can see, two very different family policies about how you should live the truth described for you in verse 12 of chapter 13. He pictures toward the cities, halfway between the ecclesia and the world. You can see the spiral downwards Lot's taking here. Before long, in chapter 14, you find he's now living in the city. All separation's now gone. Lot's actually become a member of the city of Sodom. And because of his righteous soul being vexed with the unlawful conduct that happened in that place, Lot decides that he's going to try and reform it. Now, how does that happen? So you're a brother or you're a sister, and you've got a problem with this ecclesia because perhaps the ecclesia's let you down. And so because of your pride, you can never heal the breach. And even if a brother is prepared to bare his soul before you, you'll never accept that because you don't want to ever be subject to him again. Because deep down you know that he makes better decisions than you, but you never want to admit that now because he's let you down once. So you'll never join his ecclesia ever again. And so now you've got to maintain a justification for not coming to the meeting, or a justification for being somewhere in life that you shouldn't be. And so what you say is, well, it's better I stay here because perhaps I can work with the people here. It's better I live in isolation because I can preach to my neighbour. And so Lot says, well, I'm going to try and reform the city of Sodom. I'm going to become a town councillor. And you can imagine he would have all sorts of justifications now why he could never leave Sodom, despite the fact that every week that went by, another member of his ecclesia resigned. Abraham in chapter 14 has got 318 soldiers trained in his own house. As we mentioned in our last class, probably 1,000 people in Abraham's camp. If, as a consequence of the strife between the herdmen in chapter 13 and verse 7, if they split the whole ecclesia down the middle 50-50, you've got to believe that Lot took somewhere in the vicinity of 1,000 people down to Sodom. He comes out with 2 daughters, and that's all. He lost an ecclesia by going to Sodom. Whereas I'll show you, in contrast to that, Abraham is increasing the number in his ecclesia up there in Hebron. Like, this is an unmitigated failure by Lot because of personal pride. There's no question Abraham had let him down. But do you think Abraham was a big enough man to admit that? Of course he was. He's going to have to admit it to his wife. He's admitting it to God when he rebuilds his relationship in the early verses of chapter 13. Is there any question that he would admit it to Lot? I don't think any question at all. The problem is, would Lot accept the apology? No. And now he's got independent financial security? He doesn't need to. The problem is, his name means veiled, and his decision-making was very much in that vein. He can't make good decisions in ecclesial life. He just didn't see consequences. Verse 11, chapter 13. So Lot chose them all the plain of Jordan. Lot journeys east and they separated themselves, the one from the other. Where it says here, the one from the other, it literally means a man from his brother. The one from the other, literally a man from his brother. This is not just a polite disagreement, this is a major parting of the ways. They will never see eye to eye again. Brother has parted from brother. It's a tragedy. It began with strife, it ends in separation. And from that time forward, the descendants of Lot would be hostile to the descendants of Abraham. They were the Ammonites and Moabites. They had no time for the Jews ever after. Verse 12. Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan. Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent towards Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before Yahweh exceedingly. And there's the contrast. That's who Lot has chosen for neighbours. And Lot had a choice, but that's who he chose for neighbours. Wicked and sinners. You know, I don't have time to go through all this. These are the issues of Sodom. The point of this over here is this. What's the issue here? What is the wicked sinfulness of Sodom? Well, you know, it was a homosexual city. That's the short answer to it. When Jesus talks about Sodom and Gomorrah in the New Testament, in Luke chapter 17, he doesn't mention anything like that. Luke 17 verse 28, it says, likewise also was it in the days of Lot. They ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they builded, but the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. So when the Lord identifies the problem with Sodom, he doesn't mention anything about the moral iniquity of that city, which we know was a problem from Genesis chapter 19. He talks about building and planting and buying and selling. Well, so what was the problem with Sodom? Well, why does the Lord have a very different view to the problems of Sodom than what you find in the book of Genesis? Well, the issue is, I believe, that Genesis and the Lord are talking about two very different issues of Sodom. In Genesis 13 here and 19, the world in Sodom was every bit as immoral as Genesis describes. But the ecclesia in Sodom, it wasn't doing the grossest sins of the world. The ecclesia never ever does do the grossest sins in the world. But what the ecclesia does is it gets involved in materialism. And so the Lord's comment, I believe, in Luke chapter 17, is not particularly talking about the worldly people of Sodom, but it's talking about the ecclesia in Sodom. This is why Lot lost 1,000 people in Sodom. There was too much money in Sodom. Jobs were easy, food was easy, spare time was abundant. Ezekiel 16 tells you what was the problem in Sodom. And the ecclesia therefore was afflicted with pride, with fullness of bread, and too much spare time. Now, what does this mean in our modern context? A desire to get on in life. A desire to make money. And a desire to spend it. And that's what will kill your ecclesia, isn't it? Kill it dead. Absolutely. That was the problem with Sodom. That's not speaking about the grosser sins of Sodom. This is the ecclesial problem in Sodom, you see. And that's what Lot took his ecclesia into. Could not see that that's where things would lead to. No idea whatsoever. So come to Genesis chapter 19. Let's just, since I've mentioned it, let's just go here and simply make the point. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because you know the story of Genesis 19. But here's the mess that Lot has got himself into. Genesis 19 in verse 1, it tells you that there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. Lot, seeing the angels, arose to meet them. Now, Lot's, of course, concerned when two men walk into Sodom, because the streets of Sodom at night are a dangerous place to be. So he's keen to avoid any problem occurring, so he's going to have these two men into his house, not realising at this point that they're angels. Lot's sitting at the gate of Sodom, of course. The gate of the city was the traditional place where people gathered to do business or to judge civil matters. The gate of the city represents the control of the city. Genesis 22:17 says that Christ shall possess the gate of his enemies. That means he will have complete victory over his enemies. So the gate of the city is the control of the city. And Lot's so upset by events that are happening in Sodom that he's going to yoke himself unequally with believers. And he's going to join the town council and get involved in local body politics to try and make a difference in the conduct of Sodom. Wow. Verse 9, you know what the men of Sodom think about that? They said, stand back. They said again, this one fellow came in to sojourn, speaking of Lot, and he will needs be a judge. Now we're going to deal worse with thee than with them, he said. So the men of the city resent the fact that Lot's got this promoted position in the city of Sodom. How does he get to such a position? How would Lot, he's a foreigner, how did he get a position like that? Well, I'd suggest very possibly because in Genesis chapter 14, Abraham has rescued the city of Sodom. And Abraham won't take even a shoe latchet from the king of Sodom. And so when Lot walks down to Sodom, I think there's every chance that because of the great debt of gratitude that Bera, the king of Sodom, has toward Abraham, he offers Lot a position and Lot accepts it. It's hard to see how else Lot, as a foreigner, could get into such a senior position. But that would be one way, possibly, that it occurred. Whatever the case is, the locals resent Lot's position on the council. Well, it tells you something about the character of the city and Lot's position in it in verse 8. So these men now want to know the two angels that Lot's brought into his house. And Lot says, instead of sending the men out to the street, he says, behold, I've got two daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out to you and do to them as is good in your eyes. And you say, how can a man who vexes his righteous soul, 2 Peter 2, ever say words like that? How can that, I mean, just how righteous really was Lot? Well, I think the thing you've got to understand is Lot's now backed himself into a corner by going and living in the city. No matter what he does in a situation like this, he's going to sin. Because he's shut so many doors in life, he's now in an almost impossible situation. His choice is to choose the lesser of two evils, both of which are going to be sins. He's got no choices. The other choice would be to forfeit his own life, and then the men will have whatever way they want with his daughters anyway. He's got no choice at all. So he makes the best of an impossible situation. The point is, even before you get to situations like what you're seeing here in chapter 13, verse 8, you've got to be exiting the situation. Because if you leave your decision on contact with the world right to the last minute, it is likely that you'll be faced with decisions, none of which are good, all of which are going to involve sin, because you haven't got out of the situation quick enough. Life's like that. That's what happens. Well, that's Lot's best foot forward, if you like. What do you know about his family? Well, look at verse 14 of Genesis 19. They're going to leave the city. And Lot went out, it says, and he spake to his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, quick, we're going to get out of this place, because Yahweh's going to destroy the city. And he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. So Lot's sons-in-law clearly don't even know what Lot believes. They don't even take him seriously when he says that the God of the Hebrews is going to destroy the city. So how good and effective a preacher do you think what Lot was? He's not even convincing the boys that are bearing his girls. And what about the girls? We'll look at verse 29. Came to pass that God destroyed the cities of the plain, and remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities. Lot went up out of Zoar, and dwelt in the mountains, and his 2 daughters with him. For he feared to dwell in Zoar, and so he dwells in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man on the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Who are we going to marry now? Dad's old. All the rest of the city have been destroyed. Where will we find husbands? And you know what happens as a consequence of that. But what about the ecclesia in Hebron? Any possibility of marrying there? Doesn't even occur to them. So not only is Lot not telling his sons-in-law what he believes, his daughters don't even appear to know that there's another ecclesia over the river. And so they're going to engage in contact with their father in order to have children when what have we got happening in Lot's family? And he's there on the town council to try and reform Sodom. He has lost his ecclesia. He is an extremely poor decision maker. And even his own children have no idea that there's a thriving ecclesia not so many miles away. Unbelievable. So what was the cost of compromise for Lot? Well, you know, Sodom's destroyed in Genesis 19. Abraham has the negotiation with the angel. We're saying for 50, for 40, 45, 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10, and he pleads with the angel not to be upset with him, and he gets the number right down to 10. Will you save the city? That is, will you withdraw your hand and not destroy Sodom if there are 10 righteous people? Now, why doesn't Abraham go below 10? Well, of course, he's getting embarrassed. But I think 10 was probably significant. He goes down here with an ecclesia of up to 1,000, based on splitting the camp 50-50 and the number we think that Abraham must have had with him. He's got sons-in-law, plural, it tells you in verse 14. I'm going to suggest to you that's probably 3 sons-in-law. And therefore he had 3 daughters. That's 6 people. He's got 2 unmarried daughters. 8 people. He's got a wife. 9. He's got himself. That's probably why Abraham got down to 10. I dare say they're relatives. He knew when Lot's daughters got married, he would find out these things by and by. So there were 10 people, if you like, in Lot's immediate family. Will you save the city for 10? Yes, I'll save the city for 10. How would you be? If that was your prayer with an angel about an ecclesia that you knew, about an immediate family that you knew, and you get up in verse 29 and watch smoke coming out of the ground. Abraham never ever saw Lot again after this time. Lot will never go back to Abraham after this time. For all Abraham knew, in verse 29 of chapter 19, he was watching the ashes of his nephew float up into the clouds. Tragic. Terrible. Back to chapter 13. Well, as soon as Lot's departed. It tells you in verse 14 that now God speaks to Abraham. Now, Abraham would be pretty upset at this point because he's tried very hard to heal the breach between himself and Lot. And there's a parallel, you see, because in verse 10 it says that Lot lifted up his eyes and he beheld. And in verse 14, Yahweh says to Abraham after Lot was departed, lift up your eyes now, Abraham, and you behold. North, south, east and west. So you can see two men now lifting up their eyes and seeing two very different things. Because all the land, verse 15, which you see, Abraham, I'm going to give it to you. Now arise, verse 17, and walk through that land in the length and breadth, because wherever you put your foot, I'm going to give it to you. So he's told in verse 14 to stand still and to lift up his eyes, and there is told in verse 17 to start walking. So there's the faith, verse 14, and there's the works in verse 17. You see, this is what Abraham was like. You know, the Apostle Paul's commenting on this. You read in Romans chapter 4 and verse 12, Abraham received the sign of circumcision as a token of his faith, and he's become the father of circumcision, not to the Jews only, but to all those who walk in the steps of the faith of our father Abraham. So there's the question for us. Verse 17. Whereabouts are we leaving our footprints? You know, we're walking through life, we're leaving footprints all over the place. We're leaving fingerprints all over the place. Whereabouts have your footprints been? Have they been in places that you've been prepared to put on a slide here and show the ecclesia? And if not, what is so? Why so? Those that bear faith only walk where Abraham walked. Never forget it. It's a very powerful lesson. All right. So we know what happened down the Sodom with Lot's ecclesia and with Lot's decision making. What's happening up here with Abraham? Well, verse 18 tells you that Abraham removed his tent and came and dwelled in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron. And he built an altar unto Yahweh. So you see the strength of the relationship between Abraham and his God. There is continual communication now. None of this making decisions, unilateral executive sort of decisions and running off to Egypt. Now everything's done prayerfully and carefully. And he's building altars wherever he goes. And now he's living up here in Hebron, in the plain or the wood, the forest of Mamre, it tells us in chapter 13 and verse 18. The interesting thing is that in chapter 14 you have the invasion of the northern kings, and Abraham goes and rescues Lot. And amongst the soldiers that Abraham took when he rescued Lot was a man called Mamre. Now Mamre, it tells you in verse 18 of chapter 13, Abraham's living in it says the plain of Mamre, it means the wood or the forest of Mamre, so the forest where Mamre lived. Mamre himself was alive and a contemporary of Abraham. And in chapter 14 and verse 13 it says that there came out one that had escaped, so one of the members of Sodom that escaped, and told Abraham the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, brother of Anna, and these were confederate with Abraham. So Abraham's dwelling in the wood or the forest of Mamre with Mamre, Eshcol, and Anna. And it tells you that they are confederate with Abraham. Now, the word confederate here in chapter 14 and verse 13 is the Hebrew word, or words, Baal Berith. And it means lords of the covenant. And the point is that these men here were Abraham's next door neighbours, and they've made a covenant with Abraham. They are, it appears, in covenant relationship. He's converted his next door neighbours. That's what Abraham's doing up there in Hebron. He's converting the locals. So his ecclesia is growing and Lot's ecclesia is shrinking. There's the contrast, there's the difference between Abraham and Lot. I'll show you, that's interesting. I'll show you something even more interesting. You come back to chapter 14, verse 7. Here's the invasion of the kings of the north. And it tells you that they, having invaded, they returned, these northern kings, and they came to Ein Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazazon Tamar. So when the northern kings come down under Kedorlaomer, they invade all these Amorite cities, they loot and pillage Sodom, and they take all the captives and spoil of Sodom up north. Abraham then has to go and rescue them. That's the story of Genesis chapter 14. Well, the interesting thing is, of course, is that they destroy the cities of the Amorites in this typical invasion, typical of Armageddon. When Abraham goes up to rescue Lot, he takes with him Amorites. These Amorites, Mamre, Eshcol, Anna, didn't seem to have any big problem with Amorite cities being taken. They don't go out to defend Amorite cities, but as soon as Abraham says to them, hey, our brother's being taken captive, they put swords on and they go up to rescue Lot with Abraham. They're in the truth, you see. The strong implication appears to be that these Amorites that Abraham's living next to are in the truth. They have separated from their own countrymen, and they're prepared to rally to the call of Abraham when Abraham wants assistance. So at the very same time as I say that Lot is losing an ecclesia day by day, tens and hundreds of people, Abraham is increasing his ecclesia. And there's the contrast. There was a time, you see, when they were united, but strife separates them. Abraham lifts his eyes and Lot lifts his eyes, and they see two very different things. Abraham dwells in Mamre, Lot dwells in the plain. Abraham succeeds with the local population, bringing the truth. Lot fails with the local population. They hate him. They resent the fact that he's telling them what to do. Abraham's son marries in the truth, Isaac. Lot's daughters marry outside. That boy is blessed by God. These daughters are cursed by God. Amorites and Moabites. Abraham's Lot is memorialised in 1 Peter 3 verse 6 as a faithful woman whose daughters ye are if you serve God without any fear or terror. Lot's wife is also memorialised. Remember Lot's wife. Two very different ecclesial policies, two very different family policies. It needn't have been so. And what was it that caused the rift here? Pride. Pride. Plain and simple. When Abraham ventured into Egypt, he did more than compromise his wife and endanger himself. He irreversibly damaged his relationship with Lot. Lot would never trust Abraham again, and despite Abraham's greater spiritual insight and fearless rescue of him, Lot would never again join his ecclesia. But even though he was personally righteous, Lot had no foresight. Using the benefits the world provides may make life easier, but can lead to problems because your example may become a stumbling block to others, especially your children or those younger than you, or your nephews. Be honest, therefore, about your motives for utilising even legitimate worldly benefits. Never judge the truth by the conduct of others, and never let pride force you into making rash decisions just because people you trust let you down.